Hey there, everybody. Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness, leading the movement for movement. And in this edition of Autism Fitness Tuesday training, going to be doing some video analysis, not only of the squat, and of course, a particular athlete performing the squat, but taking into account our standard operating system, the PAC profile, physical, adaptive, and cognitive, because these are the three areas of ability that we always want to be aware of, both assessing and addressing when we are working with our autism and neurodivergent athletes. And in giving you this example here, you can see through my coaching eye exactly what is going on in my brain when an athlete is performing a particular exercise. It is of utmost importance that we understand what the exercise is supposed to do, what the exercise is supposed to look like, and how best to either modify or cue that athlete to perform the exercise as best they can. Why is this the case? Because many of our autism and neurodivergent athletes do have some strength and motor planning deficits, particularly when they're performing strength-based exercises. So rather than just have them continue to perform an exercise at a level that's not going to be beneficial, inviting compensatory movement, having the mechanics break down, we want to identify the points at which the athlete can complete the exercise successfully so that we can have the holy grail of training, that is the training effect, where the exercise is performed with sufficient stability and control so that the athlete gets stronger, more powerful, moves better, whatever the exercise outcome is supposed to be for that particular exercise. Different exercises are going to have different benefits, and we want to make sure that the athlete benefits as much as possible from a particular exercise. And the only way to do that is, again, to number one, understand the function of the exercise. Number two, understand the common compensatory movement patterns that occur with this exercise. And three, put that into practice with a particular athlete and analyze their particular capability with that movement. So today, in this Tuesday training, we're looking at the squat pattern here. Now, one of the interesting things going on with this athlete as I start this video.
What was the question?
I'm going to keep this
Does he want a suit?
Down. My athlete first is asking me if my cat was wearing a suit, and then we get into this delightful, I would not trade this conversation for anything, this conversation about cats and rodeos. If you're working with the autism and neurodivergent population, you might have had a similar conversation with some of your athletes or clients or the people in your care. I love these opportunities to be creative and to engage our athlete. Now, here's the thing when we start looking at physical, adaptive, and cognitive skills as they relate to a particular exercise. So you notice that I'm starting this athlete out at an elevated platform with his squat because from prior assessment, if he goes too far below parallel, he is not able yet, and we say yet because that's the goal, to control the eccentric or lowering portion of that exercise. And it's off, and we also see and we're likely to see it in this video as well, the athlete compensating on his way up. Now, again, these are really important things to take into consideration because just giving somebody an exercise and saying, here, do this, is not enough to ensure that they are going to get the most out of that exercise And that is not going to lead them to performing that movement pattern better. That is the entire reason why we modify an exercise or simplify the level of challenge. In the case of the squat, and this is a lot of what we cover in the Autism Fitness certification, hint, but in the case of the squat, the ways that we typically modify this pattern is by having the athlete perform the squat to an elevated surface to the point at which we are not seeing breakdown of the movement. Let's go from here.
That's a great question. I don't think that.
So we're having this dialogue, which great, keeping the athlete engaged. Now, as he's squatting down, this is looking pretty good. Not ideal so far. By pretty good, he's making, you can see the feet. So we always start with the feet. He's making good ground contact. He's rooting well here. And that's important because if we don't start with a good foot position, then things can get, to use a technical term, out of whack pretty quickly. So we want the athlete to be rooted and have a shoulder width, if not slightly wider position. So you can see here, you notice you can see the top of the athlete's head, and he's readjusted his foot position a little bit so it's more narrow. The issue with this is now because of both because of the narrow stance and because he's losing focus a little bit, he's beginning to lean forward. We refer to this as trunk fold or folding forward. And what's happening is there's a temporary loss of trunk stability here. So you can see his head and his chest and his trunk are flexing forward now. So it's a suboptimal performance of that exercise. It doesn't mean that it is not a complete waste of a repetition, but this is something that as a coach, we want to be keenly aware of so that we can modify and cue where needed. So right there, readjusting to get the feet a little bit wider. Now, in this case, in reviewing the video also, he took the cue a little bit. So the feet are slightly wider, not by much. I would like to have them a little bit wider on the next set because a wider stance is going to give our athlete more stability and control.
I don't think he's ever been to one of those rodeos where you.
So those last two reps looked a little bit better, most likely because of the repositioning or widening of the feet of that stance. A wider stance is going to give a more stable base. That was a nice rep, except for the fact that the feet came up a little bit. He was readjusting. These are things that could seem really nuanced for an athlete, but they do make a big difference. Now, let's go back to the physical, the adaptive, and the cognitive here. Physically, is the athlete able to complete this exercise at the current level of ability? Well, we see a little bit of discrepancy from repetition to repetition. So in the next set, I might elevate the platform a little bit. From an adaptive perspective, is he motivated enough to perform the exercise? This is where it gets really interesting. He's sufficiently motivated, yes. However, in the course of this dialogue that we're having right now about cats and rodeos, he is getting a little bit distracted. So as a coach, we have to balance, in this case, I have to balance out the levity of this conversation with his performance of the exercise. Because if we go too far to having this silly conversation, it takes his focus away from performing this exercise to his best of current ability. So now you notice I'm bringing it back a little bit here. Now he's stopped because he's so interested in having this conversation that he's ceased to do the rep for a couple of seconds. So the athlete may seem on task, but he is getting a little bit distracted here as well. That rep looked pretty good. And now you see, if I pull this back a little bit, he's leaning forward again. So leaning forward right there. I'm going to pull this back so you can see it. Pretty good rep right there. Why? Look at the difference. Down and up. So you see that great clear. You can see the front of his shirt right there. You can see his forehead. Excellent. Next rep after this, little forward fold so we can see the top of the head here. And that's indicative that the athlete is folding forward, something that we want to avoid. And the way that we can do that, or the ways that we can do that, again, are having the athlete either take a wider stance, or we can elevate that platform. In this case, because I have several Olympic plates stacked up, I can just add another plate. All right. So here he's still talking. Let's check out this rep. That was another really good rep. So in a given set, typically with our strength-based exercises, our squats, our presses, our pulls, we go between 8 and 12 reps, which is typical for a strength and hypertrophy program. And it's not as though it's always going to be the same rep to rep, but we want to keep it within the realm of as best possible control and movement as possible. If I know I just said possible twice in that sentence, and I apologize for that, but we want to keep the athlete in that narrow space of best possible performance without too much deviation. Right? So here's the adjustment. That was a really nice rep here. That was a little, so you can see he's going back and forth. And that may be because while he's thinking about what he's going to say next and getting a little bit distracted from rep to rep, one of the reps he's really dialed in, the next repetition he's not so dialed in, so he starts to fold forward because he's losing focus here. Very common with many of our athletes. So what might we do here? Well, I still want the athlete to be motivated and reinforced through the conversation. But what I might do in the future is I might delay my response to one of his questions or some of his commentary until he's completed the rep. I've done this with many athletes to a great degree of success, because when they complete the repetition, it's almost like a small a small drip of reinforcement, like, oh, now I'm going to get the answer that I was waiting for. So you have that anticipation of getting the answer from the coach. If you're following along with this, getting the answer from the coach, and that's the reinforcer from rep to rep, which is really cool. And it's really a higher order coaching process as well, because we have to time that elegantly, and then making those small adjustments like the feet and like cueing the athlete to keep upright when we know that they can. Another really good rep. So now he's done with that repetition and done with that set. So the key here is that when we are looking at a single set of exercises, the single most important thing to consider is going to be what needs the most amount of addressing from repetition to repetition, from moment to moment. If your athlete is on task and focused, great. Then you can make those minute adjustments in their form. If the athlete is getting more dysregulated or agitated, then we may need to have them take a short break and reset in between repetitions. So it all depends on what our athlete is giving to us to observe. So from a physical perspective, are they performing the rep as best as they possibly can right now? And if not, how do we need to modify that? From an adaptive perspective, are they engaged? Are they motivated to the point where they are performing the exercise to the best of their ability? Not beyond their best of ability. We don't have that just yet. So we still need to keep it modified in the case that it needs to be modified, but we still have an expectation for performance. And finally, from a cognitive perspective, does the athlete understand the expectation for performing that exercise? So here in that squat, did the athlete understand the expectation? Absolutely. Was he getting a little bit off task with the conversation? Yeah, not by much, but nothing that, pausing it a little bit and having him reset couldn't fix. So if this was set 2 or 3 of 4 total sets on the next one, as a coach, I have the option to either elevate the platform, make it a little bit higher. So from rep to rep to rep, there's greater consistency, or I can hold out to answer his questions until he completes the rep. So those are two different approaches depending on what I'm seeing the most. And again, much of this is going to be based on your experience that you develop as a coach working with the autism and neurodivergent population. And of course, these are the things that you get through the Autism Fitness certification. So with that, there's some video analysis. I'd love to know what you think about this, if this has been helpful for you, whether this is an introduction to fitness for the ASD ND population for you, or you've been doing it a while, if this gives you some clues and insights into how to better serve your athletes. Would love to know. Please put them in the comments below. And definitely like, subscribe, and if this would be helpful for someone in your world, share this video. I'm Autism Fitness founder Eric Chessen, leading the movement for movement. Thank you very much for watching Autism Fitness Tuesday Training.